and actually industrial militarism. And industrialization has reached a kind of cancerous level. The great economist David Corton rightly says he had a blinding insight speaking in an airplane with a biologist, a lady biologist, Nobel Prize winning lady, with that industrialization inherently is kind of cancerous because it's a very active growth, and yet it disregards its host. So it's like a very vital growth of something, but that destroys its own host, which is what cancer cells do, right? They grow, they're wildly wonderful pink tissue, like grow hugely, like all, and surround your liver and choke you and kill you, you know? Because they are like uncontrolled, and they are non-relational growth. They don't grow in contrast to the environment. And we have this demented science of economics that thinks that the gifts of nature and of the environment and of the ecology are like zero sum, you know, they don't need to be accounted. And the waste, the cost of taking care of the waste of the industrial process also doesn't need to be accounted. It just all gets absorbed back into nature. And that false notion of growth and false economics, which is not ecological economics, is destroying our planet based on that, based on our following the guidelines set up by that. And so we have overconsumption and pollution. We have militarism and huge investment in destructiveness. And basically we have lack of civilizedness on the part of people whose technology magnifies the nature of their character as a collective. I don't mean any, I'm not, no, you know, all of us individual, the present company accepted. But still we're implicated in it because we live in these societies. And collectively, we are really behaving in a savage manner. We have to face that. You know, we get these politicians behave like that, but it's because we get them and we secretly think, oh, maybe they'll protect me from somebody. They talk about terror and fear and, oh, I am afraid, or maybe they'll keep somebody away from me. Therefore we tolerate it. We don't really go and put our bodies in the street and stay there and say no. We don't. And the Koreans do that, but we don't, because they had a terrible war on their land, you know. And so we need an education to create a civilization in our characters that matches the power of technology to amplify whatever our characters are. Or we are doomed. I mean, we really are. And our truism, like Daniel Dennett, when I proved to him that he would be back, and he might not be called Daniel Dennett, and he might be a monkey again, and he might not get tenure at Tufts and publish great books attacking religion, but he would be back. And he kept saying, I don't need to be back, I can be moral anyway. He kept shifting the thing to whether he could be moral or not on the basis, because it was funny, he had to listen to me because he was my underclassman at Exeter in prep school. So he was forced to listen to this mad Buddhist. And he also had to admit that he couldn't really be sure he wouldn't have a continuity of some kind. Of course, it's not going to be Daniel Dennett with his beard and his tenure and his name. You know, his coarse personality dissolves, and that's why we don't remember our previous lives. But there's a continuum there. And just because he doesn't remember previous life, if he behaved horribly in previous life and has a bad result in future life, he's not going to be happy. Whether or not he remembers that he has some responsibility for his condition, which is the theory of the Buddhist theory of biology. We have created ourselves in a way. They say you don't have to go and remember your former life. If you want to know what your former life was, look at your body in this life. Look at your abilities and your brain and your mind. Look at how you are in this life. Then you can tell what you were in your former life. And you don't have to go to a soothsayer to find out what you're going to be in a future life. If you want to know what you're going to be in a future life, look at your mind right now. How much do you know about your own unconscious? How conscious of your own mental content are you? When you are in a state like a dream after death, it's your unconscious will come out and it will guide where you go. Your attractions and aversions, and that will do it. So that's why in Buddhist societies they feel that way, and therefore they don't leave their unconscious unconscious. They feel that they must look at their mind. They must spend, that's why they don't just go meditate because they want to just sit and stare at the world or do, I think that Pope Benedict says, they're not autoerotic. It's the silliest thing I ever heard. Somebody meditating is autoerotic. Meanwhile, they have like a big pain in their butt, their knees hurt, and their back and their mind is running berserk everywhere, and they're trying to control themselves, and they're trying to find out what's in their mind, and they're looking at that unconscious content that is frightening and threatening and shadows your self-image, and this person is being autoerotic? I can't understand that. He obviously never meditated. So, or maybe he likes himself, I don't know. So, and denies himself that. So, I'm sorry, I would have thought why I got on that tangent, but we need this system of education to make ourselves gentle and responsible and individual and conscious. And we have to awaken to our, we need that education. And we needed to do, and take demilitarization. I was just reading an article by an economist who looks into that, and the American thing is really 1.1 trillion yearly outlay. All the other countries on the planet only do get up to about 500 billion per year, added all together. And America is doing now 1.2 or 1.15, something like that, trillion in military expenditure. Against what? I think we're scared of the Canadians. They're going to run away from Nunavut and come and take over Houston. Crawford, they come to Crawford. That's really crazy. And and our schools are a disaster, and the labor, all of the jobs are all exported to China because the corporations don't want to pay anybody a wage. You go to an airport now and it's got a computer standing in front of you, there's no people, they don't have to pay anybody. I mean, it's just sad. So we need to change. Now, coming to where do we see any kind of hope? Where do we see possibility for this? This is where Tibet comes in. The Tibetans were bad as us 1,500 years ago. They didn't jump out of Mount Everest all nice going, oh, man, home chanting. They did not. They have their own legend. The Dalai Lama actually was very funny. Years ago, during one of his first lectures in America at Harvard, which we arranged for him, he kept cracking jokes about how he wanted to go to Arkansas to testify in the trial between creationism and Darwinism. And people kept saying, well, why do you want to do that? Carl Sagan is handling it. And he said, no, but I want to go because, he said, we Tibetans, we think we're descended from a god, but that god was a monkey. So I think I can mediate. I like that. They have this idea that Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, went to Tibet to meditate as a monkey monk. A monkey. He was a monkey, but he was also a monk. And he was meditating there as a monkey, and then he married an ogress, and then that produced the Tibetan race. So Tibetans were very fierce, actually. They're very tough people. They have an expression, when there's 20 Tibetans in a room, they have 40 horns, like a yak, And yaks are only semi-tame, always. They're really wild, wonderful beings, the yaks. They're not like cows and things. They're very feisty and fabulous animals, They browse, they don't graze. Do you know that? Did you know the difference? A yak is a browser, not a grazer. And browsing means they don't bite the grass, they lick it. So don't ever get slurped and kissed by a yak. They have a really rough tongue. And they lick the grass so they leave the root intact. That's how they can live in this very fragile high-altitude steppe, which the Chinese occupation is now destroying by putting horses and sheep and goats and things to get wool, because they think the yak is too coarse, and they're afraid of the yaks anyway, because the yaks don't pay attention to, they haven't followed thought reform and class struggle and anti-religion, 4 olds and 3 represents and 6 sevens and 11s and 12s and all these other wonderful things that they have been doing for the last 50 years. They don't do that. So, but my point is the Tibetans were very ferocious. They conquered even Tang China for a while. The Chinese used to pay them not to come because they were looting and pillaging. They conquered the Silk Route states. They fought Harun al-Rashid to a standstill, and they're the only nation in history that made a equal terms treaty with Harun al-Rashid, the Caliph of Baghdad in those days. And they conquered down into Bengal and Nepal, and everybody was scared of them, and they were mean and nasty. And after about 600 or 700 years, they were more or less demilitarized. And it was like the warriors were like, oh, man ben home. And they were the Dalai Lama says, well, we were kind of cheerful, we had a good time, we were a little bit grubby. They were a little short on plumbing, but in a way they didn't pollute the water table either. They didn't need flush toilets. They had a certain type of Swedish toilet, meaning the fields, it's outside. And so they became peaceful, is my point. They demilitarized. They made a choice, and they lost a lot of property by doing that. They made this choice to be vulnerable because they didn't like, you know, if you're a militaristic culture, your Rambos, they go out and they conquer some territory for you, maybe in the old days, but then when they come home, the wives are not that happy. They beat them up. They're nasty to their children. Because they can't turn it off, you know, they have PTSD.